Hi everyone, Chris here and welcome to an in-depth comparison between the Realme 7 5G and the Xiaomi Mi 10T Lite 5G. So obviously both of these are 5G phones, but we do have a difference in the chipset. So Qualcomm versus MediaTek, they both have 6 gigabytes of RAM, they are both similarly priced phones, both have UFS 2.1 storage and the 120 Hz IPS screens. And the battery capacity too. Again, very, very close. So if you're confused about these two, after this video, you won't be. You'll know exactly which one you want. So for specs with the Realme 7 5G, we do have the Dimensity 800U, and we've got 128 gigabytes of storage on this particular model, which is UFS 2.1 spec, and it does have a battery capacity, which is the largest of the two, but not by much. It's 5,000 milliamp hours, 30-watt charging. And then for our cameras, the main camera is a 48 megapixel. This is f1.8. And we do have an 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel for depth, 2 megapixels also used for macro. The Realme 7 5G screen, this one is 6.5 inches, Full HD plus, and I'll take a look at those screens soon. It's covered with Gorilla Glass 3, and our front-facing camera is 16 megapixels, f2.1. And then the Mi 10T Lite 5G, this one is powered by the Snapdragon 750. So both mobiles are 5G. This has 6 gigabytes of RAM, so the same as the Realme 7 5G. 64 gigabytes of storage, UFS 2.1 that this particular model has. And then for the battery capacity, as I mentioned, slightly smaller. So this one's 4,820 milliamp hours and a slightly faster 33 watts. Now in this review in-depth comparison, I will show you the exact charge times and battery life. And the rear camera, so we do have the main camera is 64 megapixels f1.9, also an 8 megapixel ultra wide f2.2, and yes, another 2 megapixel for depth and another 2 megapixel for our macro shots. The front-facing camera is 16 megapixels with an f2.5 aperture. Now, which one is the heaviest with my scales right here? So the Realme 7 5G is 199 grams with the larger battery. And then we have the Mi 10T Lite at a heavier 218 grams. It does have the glass on the rear, and that probably adds to the weight, of course. So build quality of them, they're both very good, but I will go over that in detail. But just to point out that we do have a status LED with the Xiaomi. So if I plug it in to charge, you'll see a little tiny white light here at the top. That's one thing it has that the Realme does not have. Now both of them side fingerprint readers. Let's have a look at the thickness of them. So the Xiaomi is actually a little bit thicker. That one is just over 10 millimeters. And you can see the location of the fingerprint readers about the same place. Build quality on both for their price tags is actually very good. Now I just think in hand that the Xiaomi does feel a little bit higher quality because of the glass, but it's both a pro and a con. So plastic frames around both of them, but we do have the plastic on the rear of the Realme. In the sunshine, it catches the light a little different, gives you almost a bit of a purple looking color, which is nice. But I just think the frame around the outside in it just feels a little more superior. The Xiaomi here, the Mi 10T Pro, but of course if you drop it, it will crack and it will break. So if we have a look at the top of them now, both of them, you'll see that we've got secondary mics and an IR transmitter also on the Xiaomi. So if you need the IR blaster, you need to control, say, air conditioning or TVs, then it is the only phone out of these two that actually has that. Now if I flip it over and we take a look here at the rear of them, Type-C ports of course on both of them, single downwards firing loudspeaker on both. The microphone there used for voice calls, and both of them have 3.5mm headphone jacks. Now, if I talk about the output quality on both of the jacks on these, I think the Xiaomi is just slightly, ever so slightly superior in terms of audio output from that jack there. Now, if we take a look at these SIM trays as well, both of them take nano SIMs, 2 of them, and micro SD card. You have to give up one of the nano SIMs if you are going to use a micro SD card in these. So now onto the screens and the fingerprint readers. So they both have those capacitive side fingerprint readers that I pointed out before. I think unlocking speed that it looks like it is definitely, to me, the Realme, as you can see, that's quite quick. And I'll now do the same with the Mi 10T Lite, and you'll see that it's a little bit slower, and it takes just that second more, or half a second more, probably down to the animation, so definitely faster fingerprint unlocking. Both of them are very accurate, and I do not have any issues with their fingerprint readers. Face unlocking is also the same on both of these, that it tends to be quite quick, but not quite as fast as the fingerprint reader, and of course, it's not as secure. So looking at the screens, as I mentioned, there's a difference between the actual size of them. So 6.67 inches on the Xiaomi right here versus 6.5. I think the 6.5 in hand, I think this size is slightly better, just a little bit more comfortable. Now, in terms of maximum brightness, I have measured both of them. We have 407 nits on the Realme 7 5G versus 403 on the Mi 10T 5G, the Mi 10T Lite here. So that's a indistinguishable difference. Looking at them both in sunlight, they're not brilliant. With this kind of brightness output, you can still make them out, but it's certainly not going to be as good as some of those top-end displays that, of course, in phones that are twice the price of these. Now, both of them have about the same in terms of touch response with these panels. They both are quite responsive. So they've turned the brightness up now here with this display test. Now, what about these IPS panels in terms of the dimming around the edges and the notches? Around here, both of them exhibit a little bit of dimming. It is a little hard to see right now, but if I put the phone at certain angles, you can see them. Now, I would rate the Realme panel as being actually marginally better in terms of that, but they're both so similar that I think overall, when you're looking at these and your decision is based on the screen alone, both of them 120 Hz refresh rate as well, that I wouldn't bother too much about that because they are almost identical. Now, when you take a look at the blacks, pretty much the same there as well in terms of how deep they look. Not quite as deep as an AMOLED panel or OLED as expected. Here you can see the cutout with the Realme 7 5G, that it is a little dimmer just around the outside of the cutout, which is slightly wider with the 16 megapixel camera versus what we have here on the Xiaomi. If I hold that one up to the camera, you can see it's a little smaller, and it does still have that, you can see, slightly dimmer. Depending on the angle you see it, it's really not too bothersome, and this is a little bit of nitpicking on my behalf. The bezels on both are very similar, but we have a slightly taller chin here on the Realme 7 5G. Now, what options do we get? Obviously, the 120 Hz refresh rate, which is great to have, and I have forced this on both of them the whole time I have been using them. You can see they've both got the override there. So by default, we've actually got an adaptive one on the Realme, but I don't actually use that. Not in the time of me testing, and I always keep it forced to 120 just to keep things nice and fluid and smooth. Now, they do let us adjust the tint of the screen, so we can adjust the white balance on both of them. You've got different color schemes here with the Xiaomi too, and you can also tweak that with this particular phone. So they are good there. Now, both of the phones also do have their dark modes, which I will just activate now so you can see what they look like. And again, both of them really about the same. So I'm going to have to rate the screens as more or less even. They're both average quality IPS panels. So we do have very different processors here. We have the Dimensity 800U, which is in the Realme versus the Snapdragon 750. Both of them are 5G, both of them have 6 gigabytes of RAM, and both have UFS 2.1 storage. And they are both also running Android 10, but we have Realme UI versus MIUI right here, and there is a bit of a difference in, of course, features and things we have, but they both offer, well, a similar set of features. Now, in terms of performance, I've got them both enabled to apps draw, and you can probably see this, that clearly, to me, and even recording this in 4K 30 frames per second, the animation on the Realme just seems to be a lot better. And I've noticed this in the time I have been using both of these phones, that it just feels noticeably smoother and faster. The Realme animations, the Realme UI seems to be just better optimized, less bogged down, and just a little more efficient, I would say. And that is all down to, I don't believe it's the chipset. I think this is just software side of things, that simply One UI has better optimization. The Realme UI, that is. And if we swipe down the toggles here at the top, you will see that both of these phones, they do support a few different modes on here, like reading modes, and they both have NFC. So if you need NFC, that's on board here with both of these, so that's great. And both of them do, by the way, pass the security net check, and I'll show you a little bit of that soon. So I think when it comes to the UI performance and just general use, your recent apps, loading them in, everything, it's definitely a little bit quicker from what I'm seeing here, and hopefully you can see this in the video as well, that the Realme 7 5G has a slight edge here. So the capacity in the batteries, as I pointed out there earlier in the start, it's a slight difference. It's not really a lot. 180 milliamp hours is not going to really mean much. Now, they both charge at very similar speeds. Even though the Xiaomi has 33 watt charging versus the 30 we get the dart charging on the Realme, that took 57 minutes to go to 7% to 100 with a slightly larger battery, and it was 55 minutes to go to 7 to 100% here, charging time on the Xiaomi Mi 10T Lite 5G. Now, if we take a look at our battery life, there is a bit of a difference here. So the Xiaomi seemed to be a bit more efficient. The Snapdragon 750 and maybe the screen, maybe the optimization came through with a better result here. Now, both of them were set to 120 Hertz, the screens. This is the exact result. And both of the displays were calibrated to 120 nits of brightness as well. Sorry, 200 nits of brightness. So exactly the same, identical there. But you do get the better battery life, I feel, on the Xiaomi. However, the battery standby seems to actually be a little bit better on the Realme 7 5G. GPS as well. Now, we do get a slightly better average signal strength on the Xiaomi. This was taken in the same spot, slightly different times here. But you can see that more or less we're getting more, actually a lot more satellites in view on the Xiaomi. But our accuracy of 1 meter is a lot better on the Realme because it doesn't have a limitation. It can actually get to 1 meter, whereas the Qualcomm chipsets will not surpass 3 meters. It's a regulation they have, Qualcomm. Now, big difference in the wireless speeds here. I did find that it tends to just cap out for some reason with the Realme 7. It won't go over 200 megabits per second. That's a problem I've seen before on some of the MediaTek phones, and it's common there. But at the lowest signal strength point, it actually got a much better speed where it counts versus the Xiaomi there. So that does make a difference. Although the Xiaomi, if you're close to the router, is a lot faster, but when you need it the most, when you're away from your wireless router, I found the Realme actually performs a little bit better there, which was a bit of a surprise. So this is the safety net status. So if you need your banking apps, you've got your NFC there as well. They are going to work. So that is also good to see. And here we have our DRM info. So both of these do support Widevine Level 1. So in theory, Amazon Prime Video, Netflix should be in full HD, supporting also different refresh rates, as you can see there at the top. And we do have HDR10 support on both of them as well. Here we have camera to APIs, so level 3 support on both, which is good to see. This is great. However, one being MediaTek will be a lot more difficult to get those Gcam ports, so bear that in mind if you want different performance there. So UFS 2.1 storage on both of them, but due to the difference in capacities, there is a bit of a difference here, but both very similar. As I zoom in, you can see the random reads and writes, which really are the most important figures here for installing apps or running or loading them. You can see that they are similar. There's not really too much in it. Okay, so on one hand, this one's faster, and then with the writes, it's a little bit faster there as well. So really not much. They're about the same there in terms of storage speed. And Antutu. So a bit of a difference here when it comes to the scores. Slightly ahead, actually, the Dimensity 800U. I didn't expect to see this, but it's actually a pretty decent chip from MediaTek. I've used the 800. It's been good. And the Snapdragon is also performing well, but these are synthetic scores, so it's really the real-life test I'll show you later on. I'll do a bit of gameplay, what matters, and how hot and how much these are going to throttle these particular mobile phones. But very similar there. You could almost rate them there as about the same. So what about bloatware? This is where one phone has a definite downside to it in terms of bloat. But first to point out, the Xiaomi has a lot of advertising. If this is just out of the box, okay? I have not changed anything in developer options or any settings. Out of the box, you're going to see this. When you install apps, you're going to get advertising. Now, I uninstalled a ridiculous 28 bloatware applications on the Xiaomi, whereas the Realme, I could count maybe 4 or 5 bloatware applications that I would consider personally as bloat. But there's just so much junk that Xiaomi crams onto their phones, especially the low-end phones, and that does really have to stop. You can see them all when you first get it, and you've got to go through and just uninstall all of those, and that is a bit of a pain. So we do have the earpiece loudspeaker and the downwards firing loudspeaker on the Xiaomi, but just the downwards firing one on the Realme. In terms of the audio quality, as I mentioned, the 3.5mm headphone jack analog out, I believe it does actually sound marginally better on the Xiaomi. So if you want the best audio quality for the loudspeaker for your wired headphones, definitely I would say then I would lean towards getting the Xiaomi. Now, if we have a listen to the loudspeakers now, you can hear the exact difference between both of them. They're both at 100% volume, and the winner for me is the Xiaomi, as you'll hear. Now for a little bit of a throttling test. So this is the Wildlife Stress Test 3D Mark. It is actually very good because what it's going to do is loop the same test, which is a minute long, 20 times, and we can actually see and measure which one of these chipsets, the Dimensity 800U or the Snapdragon 750, is going to throttle the most. So this will run for 20 minutes, but I'll skip ahead to the results, of course, in this video. So hit start here at the same time. All right, so Wildfire is now just finishing up. It looks like it finished first there on the Xiaomi Mi 10T Lite. And let's take a look at the throttling. Well, that was only 0.8%, so that is looking good. And we're 0.6% throttling on the Realme. And the Realme actually got a better frames per second. And you can see the performance, the score is quite a bit better. Let me take a look there at the range FPS. Let's get into that. Our battery, you can see the drop in battery percent right there. The frame rate from 5 to 9 frames per second on the Xiaomi, and it was 7 to 19 on the Realme 7. Now onto a real gaming test. So this is a game called Shadowgun Legends that I do test out. So I've got it set on both of these phones here to 60 frames per second, the high setting, not ultra. Ultra seems to be a little bit too demanding for both of these. Now I've noticed that it's a little bit more fluid. This right here is the T10 Lite, and just looking around, it's playable, really good, okay, but I have actually noticed that it just seems to be a little bit more fluid on the Realme here, which also seems to be a lot cooler. And I'll be breaking out my thermal probe just after this clip, and I'll see exactly how much cooler. So 1 hour gaming, and it just seems to have better GPU performance, as we saw with those synthetic GPU benchmarks as well. So clearly it feels a lot warmer, the Mi 10T Lite here. But let's have a look now with the thermal imaging camera. Okay, so basically exactly what I was feeling with my hands, that the Xiaomi definitely a lot warmer, that Snapdragon 750 getting up to 40 degrees on the front, whereas the Realme 7 5G is looking to be very cool, about 32 degrees. Now I saw this in the full in-depth review of this one as well. It's just such a cool running chip. Now on the underside here, it is a little hotter, and whoa, definitely hotter there on the Xiaomi. As you can see, that is getting up to now 43 degrees, which is still perfectly fine, okay? I do sometimes see 46 degrees on the flagship phones at least. And the back of the Realme, this is up to almost 38 degrees. So clearly the thermals are just so much better on the Realme 7 5G here. And finally, onto our cameras. So side-by-side camera comparison. It is close. They actually trade blows at various different things, as you'll find out. So onto our front-facing cameras, you can see there is a big difference in the crop here. It's closer on the Xiaomi, on the Mi 10T Lite. That's because it does have electronic image stabilization. For some reason, the Realme 7 5G is lacking it. It's meant to have it, and I hope it is actually coming in a firmware update. But until then, it's safe to say with front-facing video quality that the Xiaomi is clearly better. But the audio sounds actually a little bit better, I think, on the Realme right here. And as I jog ahead, you can see that massive difference that electronic image stabilization makes for front-facing vlog footage. 4K 30 frames per second video now, so they both seem to have reasonably good focus in video. Haven't seen any major issues with the video pulsing, focus pulsing in and out. So as I pan around, which one here looks the steadiest? Which one has the most panning judder, which is quite common with just electronic image stabilization especially. So no optical image stabilization on these. Audio bit rates, a big difference here, so 96 kilobits per second versus 320. Ultra wide video now, so it looks like the Realme doesn't seem to have electronic image stabilization, or very little applied. It doesn't really do that much of a good job in terms of removing this shakes, as you see as I walk along here. So I think for ultra wide video, I mean, both are not amazing quality, but due to the stability, I'm going to have to give the Mi 10T Lite here the win. Okay, so with cameras here, you can see both of them trading blows. I think daytime stills came out a little bit better with the Xiaomi, and then the nighttime stills came out a little bit better with the Realme. In terms of video quality, well, 4K, at least 4K 30 frames per second, which this does support, had electronic image stabilization, whereas with the Xiaomi, I double checked, I'm on the latest firmware, it is in the settings enabled but grayed out, so possibly just disabled there until Xiaomi releases a firmware update. Same goes with the front-facing electronic image stabilization with video, didn't seem to be present either with the Realme 7. Now to make it clean cut and easy for you, if you want the absolute best in terms of loudspeakers and audio quality, 3.5mm output, definitely the Xiaomi, okay? The Mi 10T Lite did exceed there, just with better audio quality. Now in terms of screens, I did say they were about the same even. I couldn't really decide because they have the same brightness and the same kind of sharpness to them. However, looking at some of the footage now, editing it and going over it, I do believe there's a slight edge in the screen performance of the Realme 7 5G, so slightly better screen. Now both of them have plastic build quality to them, okay, the plastic frames around the outside. The build quality I think is a little bit better on the Xiaomi, just feels slightly nicer, but I do actually like the size of the Realme 7 5G. Fingerprint unlocking, as I pointed out, was faster on the Realme. UI performance, clearly to me in my testing using both of these, is faster on the Realme 7 5G, so it's better, more well optimized. Realme UI just seems to be, of course, much less bloated as well. When you first get the Xiaomi, it's got so much bloatware on there, you need to spend a bit of time to remove it all. It's not too much of a problem, but hey, come on, it shouldn't actually be there. Get a tiny bit of bloat here with the Realme, but it's not actually that bad. So, down to thermals then, and gaming performance, big difference. So the Dimensity 800U, very cool running chip, maintains that performance better, it throttled down less, it generated a lot less heat, and overall gave a better experience when gaming, and also better battery life when gaming. Even though the Xiaomi won the battery life test with the fixed 200 nits screen calibrated continual looping test, I think the battery life in real world use actually comes out better, with better standby life, battery life too on the Realme 7. So that is my pick. This is the phone actually I would go for. It is also the cheaper device out of these two here. So thank you so much for watching this in-depth detailed comparison. If it helped you out, if you were deciding between these, you did like this video, then please do just give a thumbs up. That'll help other people find it. And why not think about subscribing for more up and coming detailed comparisons like this one, reviews, and lots of other videos